What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to another Done Right RC video. Today we're going to look at everything you need to do to make a nitro motor that's been sitting for a long time, who knows, 5, 10 years. Going to make it come back to life and yank hard and spin. We like RPMs around here, so uh, this is what you need to do to make shit nice again. So first, before you touch the engine, before you try to clean anything, pull the motor out of the truck. You don't want to try to wash the truck with soap and water, which is kind of acceptable, not really recommended, because you don't want all that grime and shit getting pushed into bearings or whatever. Then again, I don't really know how else you clean your car, but pull the motor first. You don't want any of that water or foreign matter getting inside the motor. Otherwise, you could rust the steel crankshaft and steel bearings together. Bad day. Shit doesn't come apart easily, then that might be what's going on with the 2.5 we tried to rebuild yesterday. I don't think so, but don't do that. Pull the motor first. Then after the motor's out of the truck, before you tear anything else off of it, all you want to do is the 4 bolts that hold it down to the engine mount, get the motor out of the truck. Then do a spray down to knock off any of the loose grime, any of the residue that's stuck on the block or outside the cooling head, any of that stuff. Spray that off before you take the engine apart. My favorite is carbon choke cleaner. It's specifically for this, obviously, and doesn't leave behind any residue. If you're not a degenerate with old garbage cars like me, brake clean works just as well. Make sure it's non-chlorinated. You can't really buy chlorinated brake clean anymore anyway, so don't worry about that too hard. But brake clean works just as well. Get all that grime off of it. The nice thing about the aerosol cans is not only will the chemical break up the oil and the varnish that's developed on the outside of the block, but they have enough pressure to spray all of that debris away and get it off the block and onto the ground and out of your life. That's the biggest thing, is getting it out of all these little fins, or just spraying that grime out of there so we don't have to deal with it, and it's not in our nitro bath when we put it in there. After you spray down the outside, and I forgot to mention this, plug your holes. Use a piece of shop towel. It works fine. It's got a little bit of lint or some little filaments come off of it. Thankfully, they're easy to clean out, and we're going to do a lot of cleaning, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you're lucky like me and you have a million plugs laying around, use plastic plugs or whatever. They just seal a little bit better, and you can put them on the outside of the carburetor, outside of the exhaust manifold, so that instead of getting pools around the plug, if you put them inside, it all just kind of wicks away and it doesn't go inside the motor. When you clean any of that, you don't want any of the grime that you blow off of there getting inside the motor, obviously. Then tear it down completely. Get the piston, the sleeve, pull starter off, back plate, pull the carburetor out of the block, cooling head off, obviously. Get the crank out of the block. You can leave the bearings for the moment and toss everything besides the cooling head and the exhaust manifold and the pull starter. Toss all that stuff into a nitro bath. Most of us have a little bit of old nitro laying around that we're not going to use, or it's been sitting for 3-6 months and you don't want to use that through a motor. It pulls water in, and if you get water in your fuel, it's not going to burn as hot. So use a little bit of old nitro fuel. If you don't have any old nitro fuel sitting around, then methanol is the best thing to use. It's even better than nitro because it doesn't have any oil in it. It's just pure straight up methanol. It's relatively hard to procure though if you don't live close to a drag strip that has a high performance fuel outlet, or for instance, our local Speedway Bandimere has a little hut where they sell nitro and methanol and like 4 different kinds of race gas. That's just about the only place you can buy actual methanol. You can get mineral spirits or denatured alcohol from the store. It'll work, but since we have nitro fuel sitting around, just use that. It'll kind of do what you want it to. Then after it's been in the nitro bath overnight usually, I take a toothbrush that doesn't have any little rubber bristles on the edges, just a regular old, like the cheapest toothbrush you can possibly find, and go over all the parts with the toothbrush. And then I'll put them back in the nitro bath and let them go for another day. That will help break up a little bit of the surface rust and any of the varnish that's been loosened that you can just kind of scrub off. It's a less dangerous and more gentle way of cleaning instead of what we're going to do here in a little bit. Then that second day after you've toothbrushed all your parts and gotten all the grime you possibly can off of it, that's not just straight up staining, take it out and use your carb cleaner and clean everything again. If we can get all of the oil from the nitro fuel off of it, we're in good shape. If not, you're going to be fine, but we don't really want the nitro and methanol sitting on steel parts because, once again, it's hygroscopic. So that means it pulls water in, and as we know, water makes steel rust. So clean it all again. You're going to clean like 4 or 5 or 6 times during this process. Just get into it. The best thing you can do to a motor is clean it. A clean motor is a happy motor. A clean motor runs for a long time. So, like I said, clean everything again. Then get a little bit of Mother's Magnet aluminum polish on a microfiber rag, and start going after the crankshaft where the bearings sit. You'll be able to see a little spot where they have been riding. You can feel that spot with your fingernail, like it's been worn down or something like that. Your crankshaft is probably smoked. Get a new crankshaft, get a new motor, whatever your decision is. But start going after those mating surfaces where the bearings go and where the wrist pin goes onto, or not the wrist pin, the connecting rod, the crank pin where the connecting rod goes onto. Take that magnet aluminum polish and just go over it really lightly. The thing about the magnet aluminum polish is, like I said, it's meant for magnesium and aluminum, which both of those are nowhere near as hard as steel. So all this is doing is cleaning much more. The magnet aluminum polish works like obviously it's polishing. That means it has a little bit of abraidability. So it's going to scratch off the residue that's been stuck on there, and then it'll still leave behind a nice polished finish. And you won't have any artifacting or little scratches from that polish, because if you used like a stainless steel polish, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive because steel is tougher than aluminum. So use aluminum polish, and it works as a cleaner and won't hurt your crankshaft. The piston, I don't really recommend polishing. The sleeve, I don't really recommend polishing either. It's not going to make you any power. If you want to clean it, then obviously clean it. Don't touch the inside of the sleeve. You'll pull off a little bit of material, especially with throughout all of these, I'm still using the same Mother's Magnet aluminum polish. You don't want to knock out any of the cross hatching that is machined into the inside of the sleeve. because that's what really helps the piston seal, especially when everything warms up and tightens. You need that cross hatching in there, acting as basically a oil ring, like a big car would use. So it helps with sealing. You really don't want to knock that cross hatching pattern out of the inside of the sleeve, because then your motor won't seal as well and make as much compression. So, like I said, polish up your pin location, polish up your mating surfaces on the crankshaft. If you want to polish up the rod, you can. I didn't in the motors I've rebuilt, and I'm not gonna in my future ones, especially if the little brass bushing at the bottom of the wrist pin looks fine. I don't really see a need to. Then you leave your block until the very end. We're going to have to do a little bit of work to it, getting the bearings out. That's going to require some heat. So get all your internals polished up. The other thing you can do with a crankshaft is after you've polished, clean both of those surfaces that you've polished really well. Then take a little piece of masking tape and go around the crank pin section and the bearing mating surfaces that are not the piece that's still cast looking, that I don't know what it's called, but it's the very end of the crankshaft where the that sits inside the motor right here, the very end circular part with the intake and everything on that. Take a little bit of quad-aught steel wool when you're at the hardware store or whatever. Get the finest steel wool you possibly can. It's going to be quad-aught. If you get single-aught or double-aught, it's going to be more coarse and could scratch up the crankshaft more than we want it to. Like I said, just go for the finest stuff, the finest steel wool you can possibly get, and protect your mating surfaces where your wrist pin goes on, or not the wrist pin. What's wrong with me? The connecting rod and the bearings go on. Tape them up, and then take that steel wool and get the little bit of rust that's still on the cast part of the crankshaft. Just brush it off there. Comes off really easy, especially after sitting in a nitro bath. You just want it to get back to gray instead of the orangey look that rust has. So then remove your bearings. If you have the ability to put them in an oven, like you put your motor in an oven, set it for 250 degrees, put it in there, temp gun the block when it's between 225 degrees and 250 degrees. You'll be able to smack the bearings out of there. I don't think I'll probably make a video on that because there's a million videos out there. My recommendation is going and checking out Boca Bearings' videos. They go through it both with the kind of heat it up and smack it on a table method, which is what I use. And they have another video showing you how to use the correct tool, which I do not possess, to pull the bearings and push the bearings. Somebody makes that tool. It's probably $80, and I would only use it for this. Not worth it for me. So like I said, go check out a Boca Bearings video, or any of the other content creators. There have been a million videos about that made. So get your old bearings out of there. Then back behind where all those bearings were sitting and grimy and disgusting, you want to clean that surface inside the block out. Using a toothbrush if you can. If not, shop towel and some brake clean will get off everything you need to get off back there. It's had some fuel sitting back behind there, and it was disgusting in all these motors. So I cleaned that out really good after I got the bearings out. Then clean the block like 2 or 3 times. If there's any residue that you can see in there, want to try to get it off of there. Brake clean, carbon choke cleaner, to just spray it in there, rub it, spray it in there, rub it. That's how it goes. Clean everything multiple times. It just ensures that you don't have any stupid foreign matter or little residue that can gum up the motor. You don't want any of that. We like free spinning Singer motors. We like RPMs, baby. That's the way I like it. So put your new bearings in. I'll show you the bearings that came out of this OS were very smoked. So see if you'll be able to hear just how terrible this is. Sucks. If you use Boca bearings, these are nice ceramic bearings. Oh God. They spin and spin and spin and spin. They're the shit. So, put your new bearings in. Once again, there's a million videos on that. I'm not going to teach you how to do that. It's a bitch enough for me to do it on my own, much less film a video about it where I look like I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. It's just a rough process, so you're going to have to figure it out on your own. After you get those new bearings in, the different manufacturers have different recommendations on what shields you should leave, what shields you should take off. Just follow what the manufacturer says. Trust them. They've been doing it for a lot longer than you have. I tend to use just a little dab of after run oil on the bearings before I put the crankshaft in. Then I clean everything again before it goes together. You really want it before you put that after run oil on the bearings. Clean the block again, then clean the crankshaft again, then the sleeve and the piston and connecting rod and the back plate. Clean all of that again. We want it to be freaking like medical grade clean. It's got to be just eat off of it like amazing. We don't want any little dirt nibs or paper towel hairs or anything like that. That can be in the motor. So then reassemble everything. Use a little bit of after run oil on the top of the piston and in the sleeve so you have a little bit of lubrication when your motor fires up for the first time. Not required, especially if you prime your motors correctly, then the oil and the fuel will take care of what you need to, but I think it's safe to do that. Before we go any further, I'll tell you about my after run oil. It's a mixture of 20% WD-40 and 80% Marvel Mystery Oil. Looks like this. Silly cheap from Walmart. I think a big bottle like that is about $4. And as you know, WD-40 is on everybody's shelf, so that's free. This is the Adam Drake mix, so if he uses it, that's Nitro God, and it's good enough for me. I trust him. No need to buy a $10 bottle of after run oil when I can have this, and the amount of after run oil I have will outlast nitro as a hobby, unfortunately. I hope you keep burning nitro. I'm going to keep burning nitro, but I have a feeling I won't be able to get fuel maybe in the next 25 years, maybe in the next 50 years. I have enough after run oil to last me till the end of fucking time. So do that. Don't buy expensive shit. Just mix your own. It's not difficult, and if you think it's difficult, probably shouldn't be playing with nitro. So next thing I'm going to talk about after it's all been blown apart, cleaned, polished, new bearings are in it. Your back plate has an O-ring on it. It's essential to replace that. You don't want any air leaks. That's a weird place to have one. A lot of people will do extra sealing measures like some red RTV on the back plate or unnecessary sealing things. Honestly, if you ask me, it's completely unnecessary to do anything past what the factory's done. They've been doing it for a long time. Maybe I've had air leaks and I didn't diagnose it correctly, but replace your O-rings and lube them before you put them in. Take a little bit of that Marvel Mystery Oil, that after run oil mixture I just told you about. Put just a little bit of it on your O-rings before you slip them in. Going in dry sucks, boys. Remember that. You can chafe shit, tear an O-ring, blow a seal. We don't want to do that, boys. We don't like that. We lube it up. Trust me. So, like I said, O-ring really essential on the back plate. Just about every motor I've ever taken apart has an O-ring on the back plate. Replace that. And then the last and probably most important thing besides the bearings, if you have bad bearings in your motor, you'll notice it howls and doesn't spin quite as freely as it should. These nitro motors are really, really responsive, and when they're dialed in, they should like almost wow you at how much speed they can pick up and how they RPM. They, I feel like a lot of people who think their motors run shitty, it's probably because you don't maintain your bearings. They they really make a big difference in how the engine spins and the smoothness of the engine. But like I said, besides the bearings, next biggest thing, carburetor rebuild. You kind of have to do this. Even after a year, maybe two of sitting, all your O-rings inside the carburetor, just like that O-ring in the back plate, from having nitro sitting on them, they'll dry out and get hard, and then air will start to leak past them, and your carburetor tune will be way off, and you'll have massive air leaks, and you can't tune it. At one point with this OS 11, the O-ring for the mixing needle up here, the high-speed needle, the O-ring was so shot, I would set it to where it was running well, and then I could watch the motor idle, and the screw would spin in because the O-ring wasn't holding on to the outside of the brass fitting and keeping the air out and where the needle where it needed to be. So once again, these little itty bitty O-rings on each of your carburetor needles. You have 4 of them. Your idle control, low, mid, and high speed. That middle can be called a mixture control valve as well. That's what my OS book calls it. Once again, lube it up. Can't put these in dry. Just a little bit of that magic oil I was telling you about right on the end of it, and we install. This way they go in real nice and butter, and like I said, don't snag and tear themselves or get unhappy while they're going in there. They'll also tend to sit a little bit more square. I will say, if your O-rings have gotten hard, they will be damn near impossible to get off of the needles themselves, just because they're so tiny. So I just cut them with an X-Acto blade and just slice the O-ring, and it'll unsheath itself. Like I said, pretty tricky. Then while you're putting the O-rings on the needles, you can do that dry. Otherwise, your fingers will just slip around, and it's already a fiddly process that oil and lubrication will make nothing but difficult. Another issue I had when I broke out my 3.3 initially was the Traxxas carburetors tend to crack right around the bottom of where the 3 options for the high speed needle are. The bottom of the carburetor cracks, and I didn't notice that. So carburetor or the motor wouldn't stay lit unless I was full fucking throttle, giving it all the fuel and gas that it could possibly have. And even then, the air leak was so massive, you physically can't feed the motor enough fuel to become stoichiometric and begin to actually make power and go somewhere. So that was a bit of a catastrophe. So More things with the carburetor rebuild. If you have Traxxas motors, and you don't like the stock carburetors, the plastic junk carburetors, pick up an OS 11K carburetor. They fit in the hole. They have a bigger venturi, a 7 millimeter hole instead of a 6.5 millimeter hole. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're dealing with cubic centimeters, not actual liters, a half a millimeter makes a difference. The other thing about OS carburetors is they'll hold a tune a lot better than a Traxxas carburetor will. With a Traxxas carburetor, you'll have to tune 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending on the day. They don't hold their tune very well, and they're sensitive to conditions. These OS 11K carburetors, you can set your tune up in the morning if you're at the track, then maybe give it an hour here or an hour there throughout the day. But that's all it takes to get it freaking dialed right back in. Let's say the day goes from 70 degrees in the morning, and then during the heat of the day it's 90, 93. You have to pull a little bit of fuel out of it because there's less oxygen to be burned. So pick up one of these carburetors. You'll notice a big difference in the whoo pow that the motors make too. So as a summary, most important things, I'll break it down into 5 steps. Clean it, polish your shit, put new bearings in it, put new O-rings in it, and rebuild your carburetor. If you don't know how to rebuild your carburetor, don't be scared. There's 4 screws. And if you don't take off the mixture control valve and the fuel inlet needle, these have a crush washer in it as opposed to an O-ring. So the only way those go bad, if they're not leaking, the only way those go bad is if you take them apart. So don't take them apart if you don't need to, and your engine will run good, man. So thanks for checking out the video. This has been Done Right RC. I'm Wyatt. Take it easy.